years. Did I miss anything?
Wasn't John Butler the defensive coordinator last year?
No, that was Tony White.
Okay.
John Butler did have a very, and him and Phil Snow did have a very heavy influence in terms of what they were doing, especially on the back half of that defense.
I mean, yeah, he's the final call guy, but I don't think this is necessarily his first
time being the
Nebraska game being the defensive coordinator voice.
I know that, and I'll give you credit. I wasn't the one who brought this up and revealed it, but the term "too many cooks in the kitchen."
Yeah, there was a problem last year where, you have some big thinkers and you have a head coach who is a defensive guy. You just had some difference of opinion. And I think the way they wanted to scheme things kind of got a little bit out. There were some guys that were confused. They had some breakdowns. That's going way inside baseball when we talk about like the first game of the season is, you look at a guy and is it a bust because of what was called from the sidelines or what was communicated on the field? And I don't know this. I think at the beginning of camp, the helmet communication for the defense, it's going to be in a defensive back's helmet, right?
Yeah, so I think it's Singleton.
They are communicating from the back to the front. And you look at some of the guys that are thought of as the leaders. They're in the back end. There's always this discussion about can a team be good if your leaders are in the back end of a defense? In this case, you have some guys back there that played a lot of football. I think what you'll see is it helps that Butler spent a lot of time with those DBs last year.
Sure.
And Addison Williams, now remember, here's the thing about the defensive side of the football. Yeah, they've got Williams and Braden and Simpson are all new coaches on game day. Addie Williams was a defensive coordinator.
Yes.
So you essentially now have 3 defensive coordinators again because Phil Snow has a huge presence.
Yeah.
Phil Snow is really kind of a subtle, great addition to the staff because he's a very wise old man, okay? And they have worked extensively with the defensive backs because they know them and they know what they have there. And if they're really good on the back end, then they can move forward and it can take care of the linebackers. And, of course, it can take care of the defensive linemen. But how will the chain of communication go with, the sidelines? Will it be a lot crisper where it will not be, hey, should we do this? Should we do that?
Sure.
And then we end up doing this. And guys on the field are like, or will it be very, very distinct?
Yeah.
This is what we're doing. Guys got it. We spread it. 11 guys are on the same page. Here we go.
I think that Phil Snow's a great addition as John Butler being the defensive coordinator. I don't know if he was necessarily the best addition with Tony White being the defensive coordinator because, and this was made very clear, like Tony White was one of the very few guys who was brought into the staff that wasn't a Matt Rule guy. He wasn't someone that Rule had worked with before. He wasn't someone that had those Temple connections or Baylor connections. Tony White is very much his own defensive coordinator with his own system that, believed what he believed in, and
which was in a system that they've been 2 straight years top 20 scoring defense.
Exactly.
So we can't forget about Tony White's gone, and you're like, oh my God, thank you.
No. Well, Tony White had every leg to stand on and say if somebody on the outside who maybe you don't have a lot of familiarity with is telling you what to do, Tony definitely. Which, by the way, not enough credit is given to the fact that a lot of the top 25 defense in 2023 was using a lot of the same guys whose defense the year before was not good at all. So Tony White totally could be like, what are you talking about? Yeah. What do you mean changing this? This has worked.
Now, speaking of change, and thank you, people on the stream, Watson, Trent, and a rotation of linebackers are going to have the communication system.
Okay. I thought Singleton was going to have it.
Would it surprise you? And again, we kind of beat the 3-3-5 into the ground, but there's a lot of times Nebraska didn't look like a 3-3-5 defense. Would it surprise you by the end of the year if you look at Nebraska's personnel, if their base defense is 3-4?
Ooh. I think it's going to be an adjustment period of where do you think you're deeper? If there is a potential here that the defensive line ends up being deeper than the linebacker room. Like there is enough talent there and there could be enough development there where you're like, I thought you might have said, is there a chance it's like a 4-2? You know, like is it or do they go 4-2-5? You know,
Mhm.
and play more 4-man front. Um, if they end up, I think it just depends, and I think it's a lot of this team because of how young they are. There will be a lot of adjusting on the fly in terms of what is the personnel groups, what are the formations, both offensively and defensively, where because you have dudes who necessarily weren't on the field as much last year, you I think they have an idea of what the town is, but they don't necessarily know, like they don't fully know, hey, this is the team and this is our system. And that's why I think it's very important that they have this game where they really get tested
Mhm.
to figure that out. And then they have Akron and Houston Christian to tweak some things and find themselves, and then you head into Michigan. But I could see a world where they do flip either. They could change, going from a 3-3-5 to a 3-4 or something like that. I don't think that's out of the question at all.
I think, and another thing to watch this year is their defensive linemen will be more mobile. So the way they and then this is why there's a little pushback, I think, from Rule when you talk about the defensive line or even John Butler about the concern is because they're going to show you tonight. This is just my read on it. They're going to show you tonight the way they're going to play defensive line is going to be different than they played the previous 2 years.
Sure.
What they do with those guys in terms of what gaps they got to cover or how mobile they are and how they move them around. So I think that's a big difference in everybody's thinking about last year and who you lost, and they lost
Sure.
a considerable amount of defensive linemen, whether they went to the NFL or they went to another school, and you lost your position coach along with your defensive coordinator. I think they go, wait till you see what we're doing with our defensive linemen, which will be better suited to the personnel we have here.
Sure.
That probably if we tried to do this last year, Nash and Ty would not have been as successful. So I think that's why there's a little hesitation when people say, you lost a lot on that defensive line. You were good at run stopping. I don't know if you're going to be able to do it this year. People are going to line up and run over you. And they go, well, we're doing things. We're moving guys differently along the defensive line.
Did you
which
ever,
I expect to see quite a bit tonight because Cincinnati hasn't seen that.
Did you ever think last year that what they were doing on the back end necessarily wasn't fitting what they were doing in the front?
Yes. The back end wasn't talking to the front.
Yeah.
Now, John Butler was in charge of the back end.
Yeah.
There were a lot of busts in terms of just communication on what you were supposed to be and what kind of coverage. The Ohio State game stands out the most.
So
the Ohio State game was it was a blank show with the defensive call and then the call being relayed to everybody else on the field. I've said this from the jump because they're a little bit older, especially in that area. And Butler's defensive mentality is a lot more in depth. So you have to be smarter to play defense at Nebraska. It's not the complicated Bo defense,
Sure,
where you are like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But you can't just go play as an athlete because they're going to try and put you in spots to outmaneuver the offense. That I don't think you'll have as many of those. Oh, is Bullock and Gifford not talking to each other?
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, there's Ohio State wide receiver that's running right down the middle of the field.
I think with what I would like to see different from the defense last year, defense this year, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt like sometimes when they tried sending pressure with linebackers last year or they tried just blitzing, it got picked up a lot. Like it got picked up more than I would prefer to get picked up. And maybe that is because it was a little too obvious that they weren't disguising it.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, just go win a one-on-one battle.
Yeah. I would like just that rate of rush when you blitz, like your blitz success rate, to be higher. And we talk about, I mean, the number one thing that's when the coaches talk about John Butler, the number one thing that is always said is he's so smart. He's a genius. Things are more complicated. I think that's something that would be indicative of that, that, hey, this guy is a little bit more complicated and it is a little bit more cerebral, and he's seeing the game from a coaching perspective in a different way, that when we do bring a linebacker on a blitz or we do bring a nickel or we do bring a safety, that they're going to get home more often. And I think that this team, with the questions that you might have at the D line as just a 4-man unit, that's something you need, right? I would prefer them not to have a blitz to get a rush, to get pressure. I would love that. Best way to play defense is you get pressure by 4 guys, but that might not be a reality that they have this year.
Yes, I agree with that. I think there's a lot of wild cards in all of this.
There's
terms
so
of
many.
the way they're gonna move guys around. I think the one thing where I think Nebraska on both sides of the ball will be better, and we don't even really talk about special teams. Matt would like us to talk about the banana kick during the roundtable at 4 today.
No, God, no.
Why?
I don't want to talk. I don't like
That's going to be
punting.
important.
I don't like punting. I don't like punting. Punting is a bad thing. Punting is never a good thing. You should never want to punt. You should never celebrate a punt unless it lands within the 5-yard line. But then at the same time, I'm still saying, you know what? Do you know what's better than having a punt land at the 5-yard line? Getting the first down.
Well, we'd all like to do that, but so you're not going to.
I will never celebrate a punt.
You're not going to. You do not want my T-shirt that says "Live, Laugh, and Punt."
No. No offense to Archie. Archie seems like an incredible dude. I would love to sit down when he's of age and have a beer with him and talk about some different things. But if it were up to me, Archie, I don't want you to do your job. I prefer you not play.
I'd like to see him punt a couple of times tonight. I think it's important that he punts tonight.
Well, okay. So
I actually
yes,
think
you're correct.
I actually think that he is an extension of defense, which they haven't had. And I mean, they've had good punters, but all they need. See, here's the thing. At the end of the day, we talked ourselves into the wall here about everything leading up in talking season. Whether it be a player of this program or just an element of this program, all they're looking for is consistency. Sure. Because Buschini wasn't a guy that we said is a bum, and I'm glad he's gone.
No.
But all you wanted was consistency from week to week. That's all they're asking right now. That's all we want is just consistency from week to week and not ride the damn roller coaster. Okay? You know what? Just if I'm going to ride the roller coaster, okay, I want it to be the same route every single week. I don't want to have to go and get on a bunch of different roller coasters. That's all they're asking. That's why Riley Van Poppel, if somebody says, why isn't RVP playing? Okay, why didn't he get a black shirt? And they say, our standards for him are higher. We need to see consistency, and we know it's there. And if he can give us consistent effort on every single down and every single series, then he's going to be a black shirt and he's going to play more often, and he's going to be the guy that we truly believe he is. They could probably go across the board and say that because the program hasn't been consistent. It's been consistently inconsistent. That's what they're searching for is just consistency. They love the personnel they have. They love the staff they put together. Now they're just asking whether you're in a headset or a helmet. Can you just can you not go up and down? And that's why I think it's different because their tone all year, off season to camp season, has been the same. Like you don't get the sense when you hear players or coaches talk, they ride the emotion of the day.
God, no.
Yeah.
No. Well, another thing too is, okay, so let's just say I have a grouping out there, and I know that if this grouping is my main grouping, I'm going to end up winning 8 games. But if I put this other grouping out there, our ceiling is higher, but you could end up winning 6 games. What would you take as a coaching staff?
Well, it depends. So I'm going to go a step further with you.
Sure.
Because I think one thing that has changed in year 3 is practice matters. Your practice performance matters more than it ever has. When I say consistency, it's not just on Saturday.
Sure.
I think you look at guys that showed up on the depth chart, and this is a Pritchett thing, is what guys were really good in practice. Those guys are getting rewarded. Okay, not just because you show up on Saturday.
Yeah.
It's what do you do Monday through Friday? Okay, because if you're consistent and you're good Monday through Friday, we're going to reward you. And we're not just going to say, hey, the guy that took the week off but, had some splash plays on Saturday, he's going to get all the love. That's also, I think, a program difference after the first 2 years where I thought some guys probably were inconsistent during the week, but they said, all right, you're out there. Yeah. Also a little bit, they have more options. Like if a couple of guys suck tonight that are frontline guys, they ain't going to be sticking around very long in this game. Not they're going to be in the program, but they have, hey, you had a bust on the coverage and it hurt us. You know what? Maybe you ought to come sit with me because we have a guy behind you that can go in and play. They have more of those options in year 3.
I was going to say to you, like with your practice point, isn't that just an indication of depth?
It is. It's
just because
definitely
in the past, it did not matter if you had a bad practice. This guy is just so much better than you that it doesn't matter that he had a bad week, that we still can't trust him to go out there. Now you do have, and this is my one thing about this roster when you talked about the close games. I feel like we're kind of at the point where it's like you got all Matt Rule's guys. Like I know it's that cliche of like, wait till he gets his guys in, wait till he gets his guys in. You look through this roster, I mean, you're kind of done with the guys who weren't brought in. Now, granted, Hartzog, Singleton, and Buford were all here, before him. But you look at that D-line, that is all Matt Rule. You look at the linebacking core, that is all Matt Rule. Minus Teddy Prohaska, The O-line, all Matt Rule. Quarterback, Matt Rule. Wide receivers, Matt Rule. Like, I even say tight ends too, because Heinrich Harburg wasn't a tight end. So I'll say that he's, that's a product of Matt Rule. Like, I think the depth and I do have optimism that they'll win more close games this year. I really do think that, I'll say this now, I think that they will have a 500 or better record in close games this year, because you don't have dudes on this team who have gone through that football PTSD. You have so much less, oh man, here we go again. And you still have some close losses that some of these guys have suffered, but that's football. That's normal. The guys who weren't going through that, oh, that's just football, they're gone. And I feel bad for them that they had to go through that, because they played their butts off, but that's just the reality of what you have on the roster now.
Do you have a quarterback that can win you those games or keep you out of losing those games by holding onto the ball in a 4-minute drive when all of a sudden the game has become close? Wisconsin is the blueprint, I believe, for what Nebraska football wants to be in 2025. Offensively, defensively, mentality. I truly believe that. Now, more a little bit offensively, because defensively, there's quite a few differences from that game of personnel and the way you're going to approach things. But I think all of those things, you got to make the right decisions in game clock management, which is still an issue with Rule until it's not. But it may just be an issue, but you have good enough players that they overcome it, and so you take it out of the hands of your coach. But I think the quarterback, is there a clutch genie in all the things that are positive about Dylan that you want to like? Does he have a clutch genie that is different than others, that when it's nut cutting time, he either helps you keep the football or he helps you put the football in a place where you're going to score points and you're going to win a game? Because that's what's been lacking at Nebraska. Adrian didn't have it. Yeah. Taylor, for the most part, didn't have it. Anybody between really Tanner Lee and last year, they haven't had it. No. They haven't had it. What? And that's at the end of the game, in a close game. If you have a quarterback who's got the ball in his hands that can make a play or not give the ball away, not give it up when your left tackle gets beat and an Iowa defensive end comes around and they pop you and you fumble the football in the worst situation, that those things don't happen.
You just described the difference between Will Howard and Drew Aller.
Yeah. That's a good point.
That's essentially just what happened last year. Now, do you think they've abandoned the whole 75 rushing yards in the fourth quarter because they trust their quarterback more now?
I don't think they've abandoned it, but it hasn't been mentioned in a long time.
I think some of the things,
because I think the attainable goal was a little bit further than Rule thought. So when Rule will quickly drift away, this is just my read on him.
Yeah,
is he will drift away things that he has said that he can't get to. Maybe it pops up back in the middle of the year, but I don't.
I think the roster's built differently now.
Well, I'm still going to run the football.
Well, but no, I mean, in terms of when he said that, you had Jeff Sims as your quarterback. And you had Gabe Irvin Jr. and Ramir Johnson and, a plethora of running backs. Like, I do wonder, I would love to know if they hold the